Well,
Hey!
Ryan, welcome. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, world, to another edition of the Vitalogy podcast.
It's great to be back.
Ryan, it is very good to be here with you today. And ladies and gentlemen of the audience.
Here.
Oh, yes, we're going to share on socials because we are live on the socials.
Yeah.
On the platforms of media of all sorts. You can join us here. And if you are, say hi in the comments. If you're with us on Facebook this afternoon, we're live right here it's 3:30, a few minutes after 3:30 here. And if you're watching after the fact, then please feel free to comment and whatnot, but we won't be able to interact with you directly. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you can. If you're joining us on our podcast feed, thank you for finding us. You can find that wherever good podcasts are found.
And where bad ones are found.
Or bad ones as well, yeah. And we are Vitalogy, Vitalogy. It is the study of life.
Right on. We got Irene on here,
All
Mark
right.
on here. Good to see you guys.
What's
Number of other
up,
folks.
everybody? What's up, Irene? Hello, Mark. Good to see you guys. And a bunch of others are joining as we speak. We're in a little bit different time. And because this is baseball season still, and it is playoff season.
Here we go.
And yes, indeed. And our boys are both on different teams, but they have the exact same schedule. So it turns out
This works out well.
It works out well. So I'll see you later tonight.
Yes,
on the other field, I'll look over and wave.
We'll be walking. Well, Kelly will back and forth between two fields.
That's
I
right.
coach one of the teams. It's hard to walk back and forth.
Yes, it is. Yes, because you have two games.
Yeah. Yeah, both
you
at
have
5
two games,
o'clock.
both at 5.
Yeah.
Okay, and I've got one game, and so why don't I'll pray for the Angels, you pray for the Dodgers. How about that?
That's the way it works.
That's good. And everybody else, especially all you Escondido people, I want you to pray for the Dodgers tonight, okay? And the Angels. That would be great on both ways.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Yes.
That's what I've been telling everybody, and they lost last night, and I told some of our elders that they weren't doing a good enough job praying for the Dodgers.
There you go.
And
I like that. They probably agree.
They probably agree. They not.
They don't want God to get mixed up and actually bless the Dodgers.
The Dodgers. The wrong Dodgers.
Major League Baseball team.
Yes. Yeah. I've been trying to get as many people.
God gets mixed up, right? It's like I didn't know what you're talking about. My bad.
Yes. That's true.
Right.
I guess that is not true, right? We know that's not. But that's funny. Well, hey, we have quite a few things to talk about. We have some listener questions and to talk about, to get at. We've got some issues to talk about, both, I guess, some in the same, but we've got a great passage to talk about as well.
Yes.
And so, like always, please feel free to, in the comments, to ask a question. If you've got something that's been on your mind that you just feel like you need to ask, it could be related to this passage. It could be related to something completely different. And we will do our best to give you an answer.
A response
of some sort. Yeah. Whether it's, it's a good one, that's for you to decide. And but we'll do our best, all right?
We will.
And we are, like always, we're going to try our best to point you to scriptures where the source of life is found, which, in the scriptures point to that source of life, who is Jesus. And so that's what it's all about. And that's what we're going to do today. And so good afternoon. I see Connie has joined us. Hello, Sister Connie. And Carolyn Schmidt is here. Good afternoon to you as well.
Everyone. Yes.
Thank you.
So glad you're here.
Thank you for chiming in. So this week we had a guest preacher. Do you want to tell us about who that was?
Yeah, we had Dr. Mark Strauss, who is a just world-class scholar. Was one of my seminary professors. He was my Greek, New Testament, a number of other things. I took everything I could from Mark. So
That's
I think the way you do seminary well is you take classes over professors. I'm sorry, professors over classes.
I knew what you meant. I knew what you meant. Yeah.
And so anything Mark was teaching, I took, whether I was, interested or whether it was an alignment with my focus or not. And so he was great and did just a really good job unpacking the scriptures. His dad is one of the former pastors of Emmanuel Faith. So Doc Strauss, who pastored here for a number of years. a
Yeah.
great preacher and expositor. And so it was really fun to have Mark with us this weekend. He did a wonderful job.
He really did. He really did. But in general, I think that's just good advice for any college students out there. Anyone that knows a college student, figure out who is the most loved teacher.
Yeah.
Find out the one that is. They typically have classes that are hard to get into, and so get on their list. Wait for them. It doesn't matter what they teach.
It does not matter.
It doesn't at all. Okay, it could be
this is good advice for college students, seminary students.
This really can't. This really is. Wherever you are. I mean, it could be a theology of art class.
Yeah.
And that would be awesome if it's a really good teacher,
Yes.
right? Or I don't know what it could be, whatever it is, and it'll just makes it better. The teacher, the teacher, it does it. So
agreed.
So anyway, I like that. So so you're a professor. That's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
I never got to take him. I didn't go to that seminary. So
yeah, and I mean, when I say world class, he really is. He's worked on the NIV. Translation of the Bible. He was on the translating committee. So he is.
He lead that? I mean,
he was one of the leaders, I think, and just great scholar.
Written some great books that I've read that profound.
Jesus Behaving Badly is the one that I would plug for
cool.
Mark. I love that book. I think it's
cool.
so winsome and great. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So he, and this was, I think this was a wise choice for this passage in particular. So tell me why you thought, like, you saw this passage and you said, like, Mark Strauss.
Yeah. Well, this text in Acts 17, Paul is at the Areopagus in Greece, and he's interacting with the best minds of his day.
Yeah.
And so I love the way that Mark sort of framed it, that Paul had physical challenges up until this point, right? Persecution, et cetera, et cetera. But in Athens and at Mars Hill, he has his greatest intellectual challenge.
Yeah.
So how am I, like, Paul has to think through, how am I going to engage these brilliant minds with this sort of simple gospel message, right? And so I thought, man, if anybody knows how to engage brilliant minds, it's Mark. And so let's have him come and teach this passage.
Yep. I love it. Because this is one of these guys who has devoted his life to this field of study and of research and academics. And so I love that. But he doesn't, he nerds out a little bit. And by the way, that's a good thing.
It is a good
thing.
Let
me be clear. We've at times have apologized, but someone stopped me the other day and just said, we want you to nerd out, Josh. It's okay.
There you go.
And so you have freedom, Ryan. We can nerd out, but hopefully in a winsome way. I like the way you said that, because that's something that Dr. Strauss, he really does. And he can go there. He could go beyond either of us in the nerdom
way
of, he can go to the extremes of nerdaciousness, nerdery. Okay, good. He could, and yet he can also bring it to a level that's understandable.
Yeah.
I love that.
Appreciate that.
And I think that's modeling a lot what Paul does here.
Yeah,
and
that's a great point.
And so I think it was a great option to. I mean, it was great to have him here. And he's so loved by our people. He grew up here. So I'm guessing there were some people in the audience saying, I remember him when he was in the nursery.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
That's really cool. So, okay. So you mentioned the Areopagus.
Yeah.
He explained in the message that that was also referred to as Mars Hill.
Yep.
Because Areopagus is just Ares is the Greek word for the Latin translation is Mars.
Yeah.
And so the Mars is the god of war. Ares is the god of war also. And so this was kind of the place dedicated to Ares.
Yeah.
And it happens to be a hill, or a pagus.
Have you been there?
I have, Ryan. Thank you for asking me. I did get a chance to go there. And actually being there gave me a ton of insight about this passage.
Oh, cool.
And I went there because of this passage.
Well, like what kind of things?
Okay. So here, I love this story. I happened to be visiting one of our teams in high school ministry, where we sent a team to Albania. We did that for years. And so I had a relationship with the church there, but I couldn't stay the whole time. So I went and traveled there to meet with them. And of course, I'm a high school pastor on a high school budget, and we're trying to do this as inexpensive as possible. So it just so happened that the least expensive ticket that I could find had me going through Rome with like an 8-hour layover in Rome, 8 hours in Rome. It's hard to fill your time in Rome. Spent all sorts of time walking around there. Got back on the plane, got to Albania, and then had me going out via Athens.
Okay.
And I had almost 8 hours in Athens.
Okay.
Now, it just so happened that those 8 hours were from 11 p.m. until about 9 in the morning.
That's awesome.
Okay, so I did not have the best hours. I guess that's 10 hours. Anyway, whatever it was not the ideal hours to be a tourist. But that was okay because I only wanted to go here. This passage, I just love this for a bunch of reasons, but one of them is because I was a philosophy major, and here I studied philosophers. I studied some of these people that were actually on this place, and so to see Paul interacting with philosophy, and I think that Paul is doing something that the philosophers couldn't do. And actually win them over.
Which is what?
And he actually, he walks away. Is one thing. He actually is able to promote Jesus and live. I'll tell you, Socrates wasn't able to do that.
That's true. That's a great point.
Socrates made some claims about the deity that they killed him for. In fact, it's not very different than what Paul is saying here. Which is interesting. They don't kill him.
Yeah.
And so he does it in a winsome way. I think he is holding his own among the philosophers.
He certainly did.
He is he's teaching them. I mean, it's a powerful statement. So anyway, okay. I really just wanted to go here.
Yeah.
And I didn't even walk to the Parthenon is right there. You can see the Parthenon. So it's a hill on Athens. It's not very noticeable hill, but you can find it. Okay, so it's not very big. There's bigger hills around, but it's a hill with a lot of rocks on it, and right behind it, or you're kind of in the shadow of the Parthenon, which is a temple to the god Artemis, I believe. Is it Artemis? Maybe. Okay.
Hers was one of the 7.
Yes.
Well, that was in Ephesus.
So it is Athena.
Yeah.
We're gonna get there. And so this is this huge, beautiful temple that you can see it from this hill. It's right there. I mean, I have some pictures where it looks like you can touch it. I mean, it's that close. And here, one of the things that I noticed is that when Paul is talking, and specifically when he mentions that it's talking about the unknown God.
Yeah.
What he's saying is that the God does not live in temples made by man. That we don't know this, but I'm pretty sure he would have just pointed over his shoulder at the temple.
That's cool.
He's not. What he's saying is God is not there.
Wow. He
does not live in your temple. So this is a really powerful statement.
Right.
When you see it there, you go, oh, that's amazing.
Because that's a pretty magnificent temple that if he's pointing at it, he's pointing at a place that people came from all over the region to worship at.
It was a pilgrimage for them. Absolutely. And here this was a place that people gathered to talk. And as Luke mentions that they did, all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing except telling or hearing of something new.
Yeah.
Right. That was Athens. That's what they were known for.
Mark said, we just call that the internet now.
Now we call it the internet. But what was unique about Athens is this is where where Socrates taught.
Right.
This is where Aristotle,
Yep.
his school was. This is where Plato, in between those two. This is the birthplace of new thinking.
The greatest minds.
The greatest minds had been there and had probably been on that spot.
Yep.
And had probably taught there. I mean, that's the crazy thing. And here Paul is stepping in there and he's holding his own, if not surpassing them.
Yeah.
How cool. So
how cool.
All right. So yes, I've been there. Love this passage. Oh man, people saying hi while we keep going here. How to Read the Bible in Uncertain Times is a great book that Carolyn recommends. That was very well done.
Yeah.
I love how he talks about bridging the context in that. And then Josh, I just got the book Uncommon Decency that you referenced. Okay, good. Some Richard Mouw.
There you go.
Richard Mouw, one of my professors at Fuller.
Yes.
Absolutely. I have that book. It's a great one. Well, good. Okay, so here he is standing there, and let's go through a little bit of what Dr. Strauss had to say.
So he sort of framed it up in how Paul engages the conversation, right? So he points out, hey, you have an idol to an unknown God, which wasn't all that uncommon in that day. It was sort of let's cover a basis just in case. And one of the things that he referenced was that in ancient times, you often viewed the gods as wanting to appease them, sort of get them off your back and get blessing from them, but just make sure you didn't make them too angry. And so give them their offerings that they deserve so they're not too upset, right? So that they don't strike you down. And the altar to an uncommon or an unknown God was a way to cover your bases just so that in case there was a God you forgot about, they weren't too upset, right?
Yeah.
And actually, just a quick reference on that. If you're interested in a book to read more about that idea, there's a book by Larry Hurtado called Destroyer of the Gods. And it's about the way that Christianity spread in the first century in the Roman Empire, and the way that really Christianity is the first religion, or Judeo-Christianity, to have an affection for God and to believe that God has an affection for us. And so to invite people to draw near and to cultivate a with God kind of life is unique in the religious scene of that day. And so that's Destroyer of the Gods by Hurtado. Really great book. But so Mark didn't reference a book, but he did reference that idea. And so Paul uses that. And I love the way that Paul utilizes the cultural context of the day in order to build a bridge to sharing the gospel message.
Yes.
So I just love that he's observing, that he's engaged with culture, and not in a way where he's like, let me tell you why you're wrong. But he's like, let me tell you about the God that you don't know. So in a sense, I think Paul was almost, we could read it negatively and sort of, and he's like in a pejorative way, sort of going, well, let me tell you what you don't know. Or we could say, he's actually answering their question. Yeah. You don't know about this God, but let me share with you about who he is. And he's actually the God who's the God over all creation.
Yes.
Ironically, you missed the only legitimate one.
Yes, exactly.
And so I just love, and I think as a follower of Jesus, and certainly in our current day, it's easier to be demeaning of culture. It's easier to be antagonistic against culture. It's also easy to be sort of synchronistic in Christian circles, right? Where we go, hey, I can remember when I was in high school, like going to the Bible bookstore and you see the signs on the CDs, like, hey, if you like Dave Matthews, you'll love Jars of Clay.
Yes.
And like I bought their first album and thought, you're right. Their second album, not so much. I'm going to stay with Dave Matthews, but that's a whole nother story. But so I think it's easy to be antagonistic. It's easy to be synchronistic. It's harder to be engaged in a way where you're actually listening to the questions and then coming in with gospel answers to the questions, which is exactly what Paul does. And it's just brilliant.
It is. It absolutely is brilliant. No, he really knew. And this is the thing that I don't think we understand fully, that, this guy, Paul doesn't have the internet to like Google search who is who is who is a Athenian philosopher,
Mhm.
right? And as if he's been immersed in their culture, immersed in their way of thinking enough to where he can pull out of thin air a quote from Epimenides,
Yeah.
right? One of their thinkers. And in fact, Epimenides, I believe, was like 600 years earlier. So Epimenides is before Socrates, right? I mean, he's way back there. And he just pulls out this quote, which this is, by the way, the second time Epimenides is quoted in our scriptures.
Yeah, that is
interesting.
I did not know that until you mentioned that in our writing team last week.
Yes. Yeah, interesting, dude. But sure enough, he pulls this quote out. In him, we live and move and have our being.
Mm-hmm.
See, that quote, I mean, I've heard it quoted, as scripture, and it is because it's here, but that is a quote of an ancient philosopher,
right,
by the name of Epimenides.
Yeah. And I read it. I don't know how you read it, Josh, so let me know. But that Paul's affirming that Epimenides is right.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so there's layers there.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We could dive into this, but let me just like the base level layer that just like obvious is Paul is quoting somebody and affirming that what they said was true, even if he doesn't agree with everything Epimenides wrote.
Yes.
So certainly there are things that he would say, well, I don't agree with Epimenides on this.
Yes.
Now I bring this up because one of the things I found out about Emmanuel Faith and didn't really know before I got here almost 2 years ago was that there are some in our congregation who don't think our preachers should quote people that they don't fully agree with.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So if I quote somebody, we should be able to affirm everything that they've written. And I'm going, I don't think that's the standard. It wasn't the standard for Paul in his preaching.
Oh no.
Like Paul's quoting Epimenides not to say I agree with all of his work, but to say I agree with this. Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
And so when people actually come to me and ask me, hey, why do you quote people that are maybe a little bit off in some areas, or you don't agree with everything? And I'm like, I haven't even read everything they've written. How I don't know how I would answer that. I don't know who has. But no, I agree with this part, and let's use that as a discussion more important.
Yes.
Let's just like Paul, let's allow it to help us engage God.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and that's such a hard standard because Ryan, and I love you. I haven't read everything you've written, but I guarantee you that I don't agree with everything you've written.
Oh no, I can probably go back on some old things I've written, or maybe some new things and go, I don't know.
And I'm guessing it's the same.
Totally.
In other words, and what I'm saying is, I don't know anybody that I can agree with everything they've written. For at one point, I used to say that I've read everything that C.S. Lewis written, and then I found that he wrote a lot of other articles and things that I found I haven't read. Anyway, he wrote a lot. I've read a lot of his. I agree with a lot of what he said.
Yeah.
But there's multiple times when I go, nope, I wouldn't put it that way.
Yeah.
That's just not what I believe.
I always tell people, like, the only book that I would fully agree with are the scriptures.
Absolutely.
And so anytime we quote somebody, there has to be that asterisk that says we don't agree with everything, just like I'm sure that there was for Paul and Epimenides.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, that brings me, sort of to the other quote of Epimenides.
Bring it on.
Because I think Paul doesn't. Here's what it says. The other quote is an interesting one.
It is.
So this is in Titus 1:12. One of the Cretans, a prophet of their own. So, by the way, this must have been someone that Paul knew and Paul understood and had studied.
Really well known. Yeah,
he had studied Epimenides. So he quotes Epimenides here. One of the Cretans, a prophet of their own, said, "Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons." Now, okay. Now here's the thing, and Paul's using this to kind of. He's being a little bit facetious here. He's playing with us a little bit because Paul realizes that that's not true.
Yeah.
And here's why. So Paul doesn't agree with this statement.
Right.
Because here, Epimenides was a Cretan who actually his school was set up in Athens. So he lived in Athens. That's why they would have loved him. But he was originally from Crete. A Cretan is saying all Cretans are liars.
Right.
Okay. Now, if a Cretan is saying that all Cretans are liars, does that mean he's a liar? Because if he's a liar, then that statement is not true.
And if he is,
is
the statement true?
Exactly. You would have to say no.
Right.
So that it's actually called the Epimenides paradox.
That's awesome.
And so here we have
funny.
two examples of one that Paul's agreeing with,
right,
and one that Paul's intentionally not agreeing with.
Yeah.
In our scriptures.
Yeah.
And so there you go.
Wow. That's interesting.
Isn't it?
Yeah, and really interesting.
I thought so. Now, but of course, now we're nerding out. Yeah. And so you're welcome. That's just going to call this the Nerd Out podcast. Anyway.
But it is interesting how, so one of the things that stands out to me. So Mark outlined 3 things that Paul highlights, right? So highlights God's sovereignty. He's ordained the places and times in which we live. He outlined God's love, that he actually wired this into into our being to want to reach out for him. And he's actually positioned us to do that. And he's a God who's reaching out for us as we're reaching out to him. And so I love that he pointed out that God is not just a transcendent big God, but an immanent and personal God. And then finally, I really like that he pointed out that the answer to the question of why pain and suffering, we don't know all the answers, but we do know that God will make every wrong right, that he's a just God. And so I like the way that he summarized Paul's message.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. And I think in what Paul's doing here, you guys, it's so profound. They believed in these gods that were distant and that were above and didn't really care. So they had to appease the gods.
Yep.
Right. They had to, any sacrifices, any things that they did was just in case, just so that they can try to get on the gods' favor. Right. And they didn't have any hope or anything. So here to talk about God loving and God caring about something that, us, ants, right, compared to them, right? Us like worthless beings compared to them. That in their mindset, that's what humans were. The gods were so much beyond us that they didn't care about us. And here Paul's recognizing that they do love us, and that in talk of the resurrection implies that he lived, that he died for us. I mean, this kind of stuff just would blow their minds, totally change the way they view God.
But isn't it? So just a few observations. Paul quotes the people they're reading, but he doesn't quote the Bible in this.
I know.
That's just an observation. I'm not making any sort of point about it. Just that's what he did here.
Yeah.
The second thing, he refers to Jesus, but not by name.
Exactly.
And I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we can speculate a little bit that clearly they were.
So just, I can read it really quick.
Please, yeah.
So in case people are listening and they're going, wait, he doesn't name it. He references, but doesn't name him. It says this, because verse 31, because God has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this, he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. So a man and him, but clearly it's in reference to Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I think, they knew that this guy was this, as they called it, teacher of new gods or something, because this was a new, they didn't know this deity named Jesus. Right. Yeah. And so they knew that, but I think what Paul's doing here is um, he's doing a little, we call it pre-evangelism, right?
Yeah.
It's winning the right to be heard, right? He's letting them know, hey, I can speak your language, I can understand your prophets, and I'm going to give you a little bit to in a sense whet your appetite, and that's what happens. Is some of them hear, and some of them like mock him and say, no, forget this, but then some of them stick around and say, hey, I want to hear more on this.
Yeah. Well, and certainly so we're not suggesting that he wasn't talking about Jesus in general, right? Because actually in verse 18, it says some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also conversed with him, and some said, what does this babbler wish to say? Others said he seems to be preaching foreign divinities, like you said, because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. So very clearly preaching Jesus, but here in this sermon, he doesn't name Jesus.
Yeah, exactly.
The third observation that I have is that for Paul, this comes back to the resurrection.
Yes.
And I would just affirm that, in that's what we clearly see the early church doing time and time again. When, we often start a quote unquote apologetic or defense of the faith with the Bible. And it seems like the early church started their defense of Christianity with the resurrection. Yeah. So we start with a book, as it were, divine, like inspired scripture. They start with a divine inspired event.
And I'd say the character of God, character of Jesus. This is who he is. He loves, right? I mean, there's very much this is who the real God is. Yeah. This is what I've experienced him.
But like the way that we can be confident in what Jesus said and who Jesus was and is we can have assurance because he gave it all by raising him from the dead. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I just think that that's an interesting nuance or twist, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think so. Well, so when I don't think I finished. One of the reasons I love this is these very things that we're talking about. But I actually got to spend the night there. Did you know that?
On Marshall?
So, yes. As I said, I was there for some weird hours. And so I brought a hammock with me.
Yeah, you did.
And I set up between two trees and I just sat there and took it in. And
only an Enneagram 7 would do this. You know that, right?
But I was all alone. So that's a little weird. I didn't actually, that wasn't all alone. It's kind of a party place. So there were like kids everywhere. It's kind of funny. Nowadays, it's not quite what it used to be. But there's so much going on here that brings these worlds together. Can I give you one more insight? I said earlier, I think that Paul not only holds his own, but he surpasses those other ones. Okay, because here's the thing: they had to in this city, they had to create. They judged what they were teaching, and they were trying to protect people from teaching things that were inappropriate. So Socrates was killed because he taught things inappropriate. So he taught the things that were, in their words, corrupting the youth. Huh. And they said that Socrates was teaching other gods, and that Socrates was not recognizing their gods. Okay, so Socrates, he thought that this whole pantheon of gods that they believed in was nonsense. Socrates they called him an atheist, but he wasn't an atheist. Socrates believed that there was a God. He didn't name that God. Okay, so Socrates didn't know the name of God, but Socrates believed that there was a God behind everything. And that's why they killed him, because he didn't believe in these gods. So here's the thing. Here's what's interesting. Socrates was one who probably would have said the God is unknown. Okay, now. Okay, here, can we get really into this here? Socrates was also known to be a sculptor. Huh. Okay, so Socrates sculpted things, but it's also known that he was he was poor. Okay, so he didn't have much money, which means that he wasn't a very good sculptor. Okay, he was a brilliant thinker, but he wasn't a very good sculptor. Now, a good sculptor would sculpt like human form, right,
Uh-huh.
and statues and things. But a not good sculptor would probably create little signs and little idols like
Huh.
this that had signs, inscriptions on them. And here Socrates is the one who is killed because he believed that God is unknown and that he didn't believe in all the other gods.
Wow.
So there's some people who
Wow.
think that Socrates may have been the one who inscribed an altar to the unknown God,
Oh, that's interesting.
because he would have believed that. Now,
wow.
I mean, now to
Wow.
take this even further, I don't. I mean, this is crazy. If you can get close to understanding who God is without special revelation, which I think you can, I think Socrates got pretty close in
Yeah.
a lot of things.
Wow.
And so that's my
that is
hope. I
interesting.
think there's a chance we may see Socrates in heaven because he believed in the unknown God that Paul believes in.
Wow.
That's
Interesting.
kind of my hope.
Huh.
And anyway, there you have it. And that is the nerdery that I will.
You have brought nerdery today, my friend.
Now, and yet they thought that they had to protect.
Yeah.
They set up these councils, and they were trying to protect people with Paul here. And they ended up saying, okay, you can keep teaching. You can go. They didn't say that to Socrates. So Paul was able to win them over in a way that they couldn't.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
I'm glad that we don't do that anymore.
Well,
So then again, maybe we should.
the internet has its own way.
Yes, we do. Oh yeah, that's back to your cancel culture talk and stuff like that, right?
It is.
Yeah. So okay. There's some other things that we could keep going on this, but thank you. Michael Lyons is here late to the party, and Jonathan Duncan is here. Welcome. Good to see you here. And we've got some questions that have come in.
We do.
Yeah. And so, in fact, I ended up talking to some people who had this question. They asked me to try to work it in.
All right. And here we are.
To the podcast. And so if you're out there, you know who you are. And here you go. Okay. This is a holiday weekend.
Yes.
We had Monday off. That was nice. That was that. I hope you enjoyed your Memorial Day weekend. This was a holiday weekend, and we had questions that my guess is they're questions you didn't expect people to have, because the questions that I got were questions like, why isn't there a flag on the up in front on the stage at church? Okay, why isn't there a flag? And why didn't we sing more songs about our country? Why don't we sing patriotic songs? Okay. Now, there was a patriotic song sung.
There was
in the 9 o'clock service, and yet people still wanted more.
And it wasn't a planned one.
It wasn't planned. It was
a
bit,
late addition request.
A bit spontaneous. And so now, Ryan, why wasn't that planned? And why didn't we have more? And why isn't there a flag up there?
So this is a really delicate issue. And so for those of you that are that know that the debate within Christian circles, you know that this is a delicate issue. I don't have to tell you.
American Christian circles, this is a big debate.
Yes,
this is not a debate.
No, not
unless they're asking, why do Americans do
that?
This?
That is a question people ask globally. So I think it's important to say, first of all, what it's not. Okay. So one, it's not because anybody's either more or less patriotic, meaning appreciative of our country, grateful for our country, and specifically Memorial Day, thankful for the men and women who have died giving their life for the freedoms that we enjoy.
And you mean that to say, because that wasn't planned in our service,
right? It's not.
It wasn't a decision saying, well, I don't like this country, so we're not going to sing a song.
No, what was planned is that we would recognize and pray for. So recognize the men and women that have fallen in battle and on behalf of our country have fought. and that we would pray for their families. And we
Okay.
did both of those.
So that
things.
wasn't just Scott being impromptu. And
No.
saying,
I had said, asked him to, this is Memorial Day, please, let's recognize and let's pray for.
Okay.
So,
okay.
But my personal conviction is that, and like I said, this is me. This isn't right now. Our elders are in conversation about, as a church, what's our stance on this, and how do we want to engage with our country and our worship? How do those two things connect, and should they be connected? And so, my personal conviction is that the worship space of worship, for public worship, is to be about Jesus and lifting him high. And so I am of the persuasion and conviction that we shouldn't sing patriotic songs in the worship services. That's not to say that we shouldn't sing them, period. It's not to say that our choir shouldn't have a concert down on Grand Avenue and sing patriotic songs and all that. But the church service is a unique space where we are the people of God called together, and our allegiance to Jesus transcends any of our national identity. And so for me, that's really what this boils down to.
Yeah.
So
So because
go ahead.
Let me pick it, because so this is something that here at Emmanuel Faith they've done for a long time now. I don't know about you out there. I grew up in a church, not this church. In fact, we came the first time right around the same time to this church. But I've really been involved in 4 different churches in my life, and all of them to different degrees at certain times would sing songs that were patriotic. In fact, at one church, which I will not name, they got very, very patriotic. They sang songs like "I'm proud to be an American," and I remember thinking in there that that's a song that I grew up hearing. I've always thought was kind of funny. It's kind of a fun song. Kind of, I don't know, whatever. But I thought it was a little weird in church. I thought it was very weird in church when that song was sung. But that was a part of it. And I don't know when, but I didn't really think about that being an issue. I don't know when I started to. I have since then. But growing up, it was just a natural thing. It was just what we did. Yeah. But
I didn't experience the same thing.
Is that right? Okay.
The church that I grew up in till the age of 12, I don't recall ever hearing a patriotic song in a church service. And actually the first time that I heard one was here. Okay. And or remember hearing one was here. And I went, that's strange to me. Yeah. I wasn't expecting that. And to me, there is potentially a conflict between praying, God, may your kingdom come and your will be done, and God bless America. That if there may be a time where I have to choose. And if I affirm both of those, how do I decide which actually has the allegiance of my heart, right? What am I ultimately holding as at the highest point in my heart? And so that's where that's where my struggle is. So if you give me just a few minutes, let me sort of, as I've been processing this, because over the last few days I've been processing a lot, just trying to think through, all right, why do I have these convictions? Not just a visceral response, but why do I have these convictions, and where do they come from? Because if they're not biblical, then I want to let go of them. Right?
Yes.
I mean, yes. So that's where I'm at.
In other words, that if we do something that is just a tradition, and we find that it's not biblical, then we need to choose the Bible over any tradition.
Yeah.
That's what. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what.
So I think the question is, who are we as Christians? What is our identity at its core? And here's what Paul wrote to the church in Galatia. He said this: there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, for you are all one in Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek. And so we're talking ethnicity, nationality, language, whatever, however you want to boil that down. But what he's saying is that those differentiating factors, while still a part of our reality, do not take center stage in our Christianity. So he's not saying you're no longer a male, you're no longer a female. He's not going there. But what he's saying is those things don't matter as much as you being a follower of Jesus. And I would say that Paul actually makes the point that our unity in Christ depends on us viewing Jesus as the supreme and ultimate giver of our identity.
Yeah.
So here's what I would say. And this is feel free, listeners, you can push back, debate. Like I'm open to that. I should have more allegiance to a brother or sister in Christ in Iran than I should a non-Christian in the States. That I have more in common with them, more unity with them, more closeness to them than I do somebody who may even be a neighbor, but not a follower of Jesus.
Yeah.
That feels drastic. I get it, but that's how I read the text.
You know what? It sounds drastic, but as I think about, Ryan, my experiences of traveling, of meeting with Christians all over the world, that just has a ring of truth that when you know it, when you see it, you experience it, and you can meet people that are, I mean, in a completely different government. Even we've been enemies with their government before as Americans,
right?
And yet there's something about the bond of Christ that is so much greater. I think it's a great observation.
Here's the second thing that I would say, and this is just second scripture that I would want to at least discuss. It says in Ephesians chapter 2, for he himself is our peace, speaking about Jesus, who has made us both one. Once again, that idea of bringing us together.
As both. Who are the both there?
Yeah. Here we go. And has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility. So what he's going back to Gentiles and Jews again. So this is like these ethnicities, and even you could say nationality, like all of that is embedded within this. And how's he done that? By abolishing the law of commandments expressed in ordinances, that he might create in himself one new man in place of the two, so making peace, and that he might reconcile us both to God in one body through the cross, thereby killing hostility. So the cross not only unifies us, as he already said in Galatians chapter 3, but I believe here he takes it a step further and says he has abolished the dividing wall. And sometimes those are literal, and sometimes those are metaphorical. Sometimes they're religious and spiritual. But I would say for followers of Jesus, every wall between us has been broken down. And how did that happen? By the cross. So actually, and I'm not saying that nations shouldn't have borders; they have to. But as Christians
don't have borders.
We don't have to. And actually, to create dividing lines that go on nationalistic borders that are bigger than our Christian faith, I actually think demeans the cross. And I want to be careful how hard I say this, but that's exactly what Paul says, that he reconciles us into one body through the cross, thereby killing hostility.
Okay, so would you say that the kingdom has no borders?
Yeah, I would.
Oh, because
empires have borders.
Empires have borders, which means that the kingdom is different from this country.
Right.
In fact, it necessarily is, if we're going to recognize that there are brothers and sisters all over the world who are, I mean, in all of those, and that's the beauty of it, that in every nation, there are Christians who we are closer to than any other relationship we can have. I mean,
I
That's
believe that
powerful.
is true. And so can I
Yeah,
give
one more.
And I've just invited our listeners, if there's one I'm missing that would suggest we should sing patriotic songs during worship, then please, I want to know. Here, this is 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. Here's what he says. He says, but you, speaking to followers of Jesus who by the grace of God are called into this one body that Paul has referred to. He says, but you, Jesus follower, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood.
You're a race.
A holy nation.
Wow.
So a people called out of darkness into light, that you might proclaim the excellencies of him who called you. I mean, so we could go on and on, but so Peter says we're a race and we are a nation.
Yeah.
As followers of Jesus.
Yeah.
And so I think that at least demands some sort of wrestling and to come to terms with our Christian identity, not just our national identity. And I would say that our Christian identity should surpass, eclipse, not nullify. Like, so that's why I have zero issues saying, gosh, I'm grateful to be an American. I'm so thankful for the freedoms that we have, for the sacrifices that have been made, for our guiding documents of the Constitution. I believe that as we have utilized biblical principles in order to guide us, and as we've actually followed those biblical principles, that we are better for it because the way of Jesus is better.
Absolutely.
So I love that. I affirm that. That's good. And yet it's not the supreme identifying factor of who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what Paul makes clear in a way that to us, from our perspective, that doesn't necessarily sound that bold to say that, there's no distinction, but you got to remember that he is Jewish, and his scripture tells him that that's not, I mean, in a sense, that's not the way it was, right? Now, Jesus has told him that it's different now, but this is huge, that there actually was a dividing wall in the temple that the Gentiles could not cross. This was a literal wall, and that's where the symbolism of the curtain being torn at the cross, breaking down and opening up access to God, access to all people. But early on, the early Christians who were all Jewish would have said that was access just to Jewish Christians. And so this was a big debate. This was the council in Acts 15 and all that stuff that they were trying to figure out still. And yet Paul here is making a claim that is so bold, that is, that kind of claim is that's the kind of thing that Jesus was killed for. Yeah. And that the Jewish leaders, the religious Jewish leaders of the day, that's why they hated Paul. Right. Because because they were holding on to power. That their authority was in control. And they even, in fact, the religious leaders, it was when they combined their power with the power of the state, that they were the ones that killed Jesus. Yeah. It wasn't the state that was at all helpful to the movement of Jesus. In fact, there's a good argument to be made that whenever the state got involved, it was detrimental to the movement of Christ. Right? Oof.
So I just think that there's an implicit danger whenever we start to sort of raise something else up the proverbial flagpole, to use that term, that other than I'm a child of God, and I'm praying that his kingdom come and his will be done. That I think we at least have to pause to say, what are we really saying, and what are we asking for, and who are we? I do think that it also begs some questions, because some of the pushback that I got was, well, we're a Christian nation. And so we can pray for God's blessing on our nation because we're a Christian nation. And so here's what I would say. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. And here's why. I don't think the scriptures use, well, I'll say it more strongly than that. the scriptures do not use Christian as an adjective.
Okay.
It's a noun. So we had a group of people are Christians. That is what, but implicit within that, I mean, I believe it's Acts chapter 11, verse 26 is the very first time that people are called Christians, but they're called Christians because they're following the teachings of Jesus.
Yes.
So I would suggest that a nation can, in fact, do things that Christians do.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
But they would be things like forgiving your enemies and not retaliating when you're wronged. That would be a thing that Jesus taught. Something like being generous, which actually the United States is very generous.
Yeah.
Like we've lived that out.
And yet, I mean, those things, I think those would be great things for a nation to do.
Absolutely.
To be generous, not asking for something in return.
Right.
To forgive our enemies. I
Yes.
mean, those would be great things.
Yeah.
I don't know that's typically not what a nation does. It wouldn't necessarily make for the strongest.
It's
nation.
hard. That makes it hard to exist.
It does make it hard to exist.
It makes it really hard to be the most powerful. I mean, but what do we, okay, so what does Jesus teach us to do with power, right? That we use our power to serve. Like the Gentiles lord it over. But not so amongst my disciples, Jesus says. This is Mark chapter 10. My disciples actually use their power to come alongside of and to lift others up and to serve. So those are like, to be a Christianly or a nation that lives out the teachings of Jesus. Those are the types, not all, things that they would do. Now, I would say that they would also create space for freedom of religion, just like the United States has, that it would a place of value on all people, that all people are created equal. Yes, those are distinctly Christian or Judeo-Christian ideas. And praise be to God that they have helped shape and form the way that we as a country operate. Now, I don't think anybody would say we've executed perfectly on all of those guiding directives. And so there's some, I think there's some things in our history, even as a nation, we look back on and go, gosh, we didn't live out that part of our DNA as well. I think of our interaction with Native Americans. I think of slavery. I think the list could go on, right? So there are times when we haven't lived that out well. But as far as our guiding documents, I go, gosh, I'm in. Yes, and amen. Yeah,
it may be the best that there is out there, but it's not this.
Correct, and it's different than being a part of the kingdom of God. And that's where I think we have to sort of differentiate and go, okay, if my allegiance is to the kingdom, and if my identity is shaped first and foremost by being a follower of Jesus, then I can have these secondary things that really matter to me. But I don't know that they should start to infringe upon the thing that matters most. One of the lenses that I always try to think through, Josh, is as we think about songs for worship, I always ask the question, would we sing this content in heaven? So would we gather around the throne of God and sing this? Is it worthy of that?
Would we sing God Bless America in heaven?
I don't see, and I don't know that we will, but
it's a wonderful question.
Won't. But for me, there's a rub where I start to go, oh, I can't answer definitively yes. To me, it would that prayer feels far too small. And very us them. I'm reminded of Joshua chapter 5. This is one of my favorite passages in the whole Bible, actually, because the nation of Israel has just crossed the Jordan River, and they're entering into the promised land that God's giving them. And they're camping, and an angel of the Lord's army comes. And most people think it's a Christophany and a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ. He comes and he meets Joshua, and Joshua says to him, Are you with us or them? And I love his answer. His answer is no.
Just no.
No. It's like, well, that you were supposed to choose a side.
No.
And essentially in that one word answer, there's all sorts of questions that come up. But I think the ultimate question is not whether God's on our side,
Yeah.
but whether we are on God's side.
Yes, absolutely.
And so that to me is part of the tension.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have strong convictions about it, but I'm trying my best to be open-handed to say, God, what do you want to show me that I just don't see?
Yeah.
And so to have a posture of humility, and maybe our listeners can help me and go, hey, here's what you don't see.
Yeah.
What I'm not as interested in is tradition.
Yeah.
I want to
Absolutely not.
honor it. I want to, and I want to say, okay, yeah, that's sort of where we as a nation or even a church have been. But my question is it biblical?
Mhm.
Is it right?
Yeah. And Doug points out a great observation that you just don't see culturally. We didn't see the early church waving Roman patriotism or opposition in their churches. So they didn't really, it was not important enough for them to even talk about, right?
Yeah.
Even the other political issues, because they had much bigger problems than we do.
Right.
And so I like that, Doug, that you say that they worship Jesus. So he's in agreement.
It would be really interesting. And I don't even know where we'd find this info, Josh. So, but I just wonder after 325 and where Constantine 324, Constantine makes the Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. I wonder if they started doing that.
If they started doing that. Well,
I have my doubts.
I do.
But,
and a lot of those doubts come because of what I hear from our non-American believers, the way that they perceive this. Because I don't know if we're the only one that does this. I wonder if in Britain, in England, if they sing patriotic songs in England. I don't know. I don't know if they do or not. But I do know that I've talked to many people all over the world who just don't do that. That's not a part of their worship at all, and it never has been, and it won't. They say if it is, it's because of the influence of the American church. So that in a sense, we're the ones who've kind of adopted this, and it gets into some of our history, and in a lot of great ways that you know the founders of our nation, but even before them, the pilgrims coming over were really wanting to come to a land that was set apart. And I mean, they were even building in some theological, like end times theology about they were going to make the new heaven and new earth was going to be here. The New Jerusalem was going to be here. So they had some, I mean, I'd call it bad theology, as well as some great intentions. And we've kind of adopted that this is where God is, in a sense. And yet, I think what you're saying and what the scriptures are saying, what even Paul was saying, we're back to this. Yes.
Came around.
Oh my goodness. Even Paul was getting at is that he's not
his footstool.
He's earth, entire earth is his footstool. He's not in a temple. He's not in a city. He's not in a country.
He's not bound by that.
He's not bound by that. And yes, he's involved, but he's above it all. And that is huge.
You know what? I think just really quick, Josh, before we peace out, because we will here in a moment. But I think it's important for our listeners to know and our church body to know that as I'm wrestling, I'm trying to engage people who I think will disagree with me, but who have thought through it theologically and have a vested interest. So we've reached out to 2 military chaplains.
Oh, good.
And ask them, what do you think?
That's great.
And both of them have said, we don't think we should sing patriotic songs in church services.
Okay.
Both of them.
These are men who have
either
given their life
or
serving, in a sense, active.
Yes. Yes.
And that have studied scripture, so they know their word. They are, to be a chaplain, you've got to go to seminary. You've got all those things.
Yeah. So this is not, the debate is not about, are you patriotic? The debate is not about, do you love our military and support our military? The answer to both of those for me is yes. For both of those 2 men is yes, absolutely. The question is one of worship.
So. And that's good. And I'm very glad because do you dislike the song God Bless America?
No.
Do you think it's a bad song?
No,
Do you not want God to bless America?
No, I would love for him to bless America.
Okay.
And all 196 other countries.
Yeah. Because he cares about them too, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
so it's not about not liking that song. It's more the placement alongside of the worship of the one true God.
Right.
Who is and I get that. I see what you're saying, that there is something so drastically different that when something like that is in the presence of our worship of God, it just feels like, and maybe it should feel like, just a contrast that's just too much.
It does for me, but I want to create space for people where it
Yes,
doesn't, and try my best to honor and love and just try to come alongside if I can.
Yeah. So maybe that my should language was a little too strong.
Well,
I don't want to should on anyone
and with
unnecessarily. You see what I did there?
Yeah.
Listen closely, just in case. All right, everybody. Well, this was a great discussion. And I hope, in a lot of ways, I hope this is something you out there that you haven't thought of. And I hope that if and now we're at the end here. So if you're at the end and either you're fuming or confused or not, that's okay. But what I want you to do is to stop and say, I wonder if you've thought it through. Because in talking with this, I've run into a lot of people who've just kind of said, I've never thought of it before.
Well, and if you have and you're going, no, I have good reasons, then I think Josh and I both say, like, we want to hear them, send them in,
please,
because we want to engage this topic. This isn't for us a one and done type of a thing. I feel like as Jesus followers, we need to engage our culture, our nation, all of that, and bring our full self to the table when we do. So. Yeah.
And so you can do that at questions@efcc.org. You can let us know, and we would love to interact. Questions@efcc.org. And I'm going to put that in the comments there. We would love to talk more about this or whatever it is that is on your heart. Looking forward to another couple weeks, 2 more weeks of not so normal, not so new, nor not so normal. Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, thank you all for being here. It is our hope and prayer that because of your time in this book, in the scriptures, that you will find the life that God has wanted you to live, and that you would live it abundantly. And so, blessings.
Amen. Go Dodgers, go Angels.
Amen. God bless.